Hi, this is Gemma. I wanted to do another video about trauma. I did a short one yesterday. I've done a couple of videos on trauma. So these are some signs and kind of behaviours and physiological signs that you have been through trauma, and perhaps that trauma is still unprocessed, because we hold these things in ourselves and our brain adapts to being in survival mode, so we can get into adulthood and behave out of survival rather than out of growth and out of healthy development. We're still stuck in a survival mode. Not all of these signs and symptoms are related to trauma. Some of them are to do with other things. So if something resonates with you, don't take exactly that, oh, must have unresolved trauma because I do this thing that's on the list. You will know. You know what you've been through. You know in your gut feeling. You know that if you have unprocessed emotions, even maybe you don't want to face it, but you probably on some level do know that. So a few things that people do that have had a traumatic past, and specifically a traumatic childhood, so when we're developing. And yesterday what I said is, if you're in trauma, and one isolated traumatic incident is different from consistent trauma through childhood, because that's going to affect the way you develop all through the ages as you're growing. One traumatic event is a little bit different, and you can still develop certain behaviours to do with that one traumatic event, but because it's isolated, it's not going to affect your development through the years over like that. Because then we just start repeating. If it's like PTSD, then it becomes complex PTSD, because we just go into these next situations, into these catastrophic sort of events that cause us more trauma on top of the trauma we already had. So just apply what's relevant to you. It's all very personal to yourself, to your growth, to your experiences. So sometimes what people can do is be hypervigilant. Now, this is a survival mechanism. So sometimes you can look at a partner, for example, and you might perceive that they're not happy with you because of the look on their face. But perhaps they're just relaxing. Perhaps they're just not responding to you in the way you think they should. And your brain can then go on all sorts of tangents. Or what have I done wrong? I've done something wrong. They're not happy with me. Going through every scenario in your head of what you could have done wrong. And we see this like as an example of people that have had controlling parents that you could never please, always telling you you've done something wrong. It becomes a pattern in your mind. So when you grow up, you can emanate this in adult relationships, thinking, I'm always doing something wrong. What have I done wrong now? And if you've not done anything wrong, you'll create a situation where the other person's gonna perceive that you've done something wrong, because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you believe you're stupid, you will act in a way that will get other people, will invite other people to treat you as stupid, or you will do things that end up as a stupid result, because you have to emanate what you believe inside, because it's energy. Beliefs are energy, and energy is what attracts circumstances and people to us. So we really need to work on what's going on inside, on our inside environment. So hypervigilance is something children develop early on if they're in unsafe situations, because it helps them to survive. So if you have the ability to have a sixth sense about what's going on in the situation, you're going to know immediately when someone walks into the room, am I in trouble? Am I going to get hit? Am I going to get passive aggression? Am I going to get open aggression? So as a kid, this is all very fearful, right? So you're going to develop this sixth sense kind of instinct. And this is where a lot of empathic people come from as adults, because you've had to really overdevelop this extra sense so that you can perceive threats. Because as a kid, you need to survive. And if your environment isn't safe, you need to create your own safety. And the best way that you know how to do that as a kid is to be hypervigilant and sense the threat before it becomes dangerous. So perhaps somebody walks into a room, a parent walks into the room, you can see they're really angry, you can, from experience, know you might be on the receiving end of that anger. So if you've perceived that, you can then adapt your behaviour to survive in that situation. So perhaps you might go and hide. Perhaps you might not speak because you don't want to further anger the person. Perhaps you'll go into ultimate people-pleasing mode, which is called fawning. People do this as adults. They will overly people-please because it's a way of surviving situations, or it has been in the past. So perhaps you avoid the repercussion of this angry parent by doing one of these behaviours, and then we can carry this into adulthood and into partnerships and friendships and work situations where we're wired for survival. So we know that if we do this fawning or we do this freeze mode where we just kind of check out and don't bother the person and don't ruffle any feathers, or we go into withdrawal, take ourselves out of the situation, we're more likely to survive that situation. And in adulthood, it's not really about survival. We're not running away from tigers. We're not running out of the road to get out of the way of a car. We might just be faced with an angry boss or an angry partner where we should be able to, if we're whole and healed, we should be able to say, right, let's have a conversation about why you're angry and we'll sort it out. But if you're a traumatized individual that's grown up around anger, you're probably going to adopt one of these other behaviours, which is immediately, in the face of anger, feeling like, I'm not safe now, what's the best thing to do? And you'll go back to these childhood behaviours. And it's all about saving ourselves and being in survival. But the thing is, breaking that cycle is what's really important, because we want to thrive, we want to live. We don't want to just exist, and we don't want to just survive our lives. This isn't fulfilling for us, and this creates a lot of anxiety and depression for us as adults. Another sort of behaviour to do with trauma, because there's a big spectrum, so you could be on one side or the other or somewhere in the middle, but you could be overly aggressive, or you could go into withdrawal. You could completely withdraw from the situation, make yourself as small as possible, don't speak to anyone, don't bother anyone, pretend you're not there, and this makes you safe. And this really is quite dependent on whether you go into fight or flight mode. So if you go into flight mode, you're going to go and hide and withdraw. If your instinct is to go into fight mode, you're probably going to become aggressive, maybe get into physical fights, maybe no one can have a conversation with you because you just need to prove that you're right. And you approach everything with aggression. Maybe somebody wants to have a conversation with you, like, hey, I don't like that thing that you did. And you just start going at them and saying, I've not done anything wrong, this is all your problem, blah, blah, blah. And really just being quite aggressive in order to put this person in their place, rather than the growth way of dealing with it, which would be to have a conversation about what's going on. Aggression is, it's like the surface of the iceberg, and underneath that is fear. Anger is always the result of fear. So underneath that aggression, there's a very fearful child under there that's trying to protect itself. So when we're dealing with people that are very aggressive and can't seem to have a conversation and have to prove that you're wrong all the time, there's a lot of fear in there, and insecurity, and not feeling safe. So that's something for us to look at as well. We have to look at the internal environment. So if we're feeling chaotic inside and unhealed, if we're like fragmented and we haven't done the inner healing and the inner child work and the working on the trauma, we can gloss it over with loads of behaviours, but that it never heals this problem. It just glosses things over so that we have the illusion that we're okay. And again, it's our brain trying to protect us, because it doesn't want to delve into these really painful things that are going to hurt us again. So we come up with all sorts of things that we can do to avoid that. And it can be things like addictions, when you're in addiction, you are masking something underneath. You're masking some pain and fear that you have inside. So drugs, alcohol, food, alcohol, I said alcohol. You could be addicted to anything. Could be social media, could be addicted to that. You could be addicted to video games. You could be addicted to sex. You could be addicted to anything that goes beyond a healthy level of interest, and it's avoidance of what's going on inside. So it's something outside to give you the illusion that you are in control, because what's inside is chaotic. I've known personally a couple of people that just keep decorating their house, and once it's decorated, they'll decorate something else, and they'll decorate something else, and then they'll buy things that have to be all matching, and they're moving furniture around every other day. And this is a really good physical example of not having control of what's going on inside and trying to manipulate the outside environment, because it's giving them the illusion, and it will be a short-term fix, that I've made this outside environment how I want it now, and now I'm happy for a week. But the chaos is still there, so I have to move it again. I have to paint the wall a different colour. I have to have new wallpaper. It's papering over the cracks, literally, because what's inside is chaos. The only way to heal is by addressing what's inside and creating inner calm and inner peace and safety. Safety is the key word. We can get all sorts of physical health issues when we have unresolved trauma. That's evidence-based. People are more likely to suffer from things like autoimmune diseases and gut issues and all sorts of other things, anxiety and depression, if they've had a past with trauma. It's in the body, it's in the cells. We have to look at it, start looking at the inner child, the wounded inner child. How can we make that child safe? How can we make them feel safe? Visualizations are a great one for this. Meditations are a great one. Reading about self-help and being aware of our emotions and what we're putting out there and why we're doing it and what's our internal environment saying and how we are projecting based on that internal environment. So there's a couple of ideas. It's a bit of reflection. I hope that helps for you, and I will see you next time.